Yeah.
Okay, welcome again to another word of Torah. We're going to learn some Hebrew together. This is Moshe Abrams and myself, Rod Bryant, on this beautiful day. Israel is rocking and rolling with missiles and bombs and potential ground war getting ready to start. And we're elevating ourselves by studying how to read Torah. One of the
Mm.
things that we've learned over the last few weeks is we can conduct operations spiritually that helps Israel during their time of war by studying Torah, changing our what do you call it, our perceptions, growing spiritually, connecting with Hashem at a higher level. So here you have a great opportunity to join us. We're going to do these sessions every week from here on out till we finish the end. And I'm so glad that Moshe has decided to do this with us. Thank you so much, and I hope you're having a great day yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here. Rod, this is where we finished off last session. So this is
Yes.
the first sentence of the Torah. So we have Bereshit in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Bara is the verb to create. And then Elohim. So we
Elohim.
have the verb first and then who's doing the verb. And then we talked last time about et is the object marker. So that's pointing to what's being created. So we have et ha-shemayim, the heaven, v'et ha'aretz. And that v on the second et is an and, basically.
Right.
So we have two ets, which means we have two objects being created. But let's go to our next verse. This is where we're coming in today. This is the new stuff. So we have here to start with v'ha'aretz. Now, some of us are already very familiar with the phrase Eretz Yisrael, so we know that we connect that with the feeling of the land. So we have an extra letter here. We have the vav, just like in va'etz, meaning and, but ha'etz here means the. That's the definitive article. So it says and the land, and then we're going to get more information about the land. But what we'll see from this is when we say land at this point, it's not what we know now. We're not talking about, kind of rocks and dirt and grass. We haven't got to that stage yet. We're talking about the basic principles of the creation of the universe. So we use the word haaretz, but those rules are about to be introduced by God in these verses. So this word here is actually a super important word. This is haita, right? And what's happening here is we have the word hoya means was, hoveh means is, and yiyeh means will be. So haya is what we call a neutral or a masculine. I'm getting very grammar on you. Don't worry, it's going to get exciting in a minute. But haya is the masculine or neutral word for was.
Right.
If we want to make a verb feminine, the verb to be, the verb to was, if we want to make it feminine, we normally add a letter hey on the end, a feminine hey. But because this already ends in a hey, if we'd say haya, we'd all
Right.
run out of breath. So what we do is we add in this little taf here so that we can stick a feminine hey on the end. So
Ah,
what that is effectively is it's showing that it's feminine by adding in a taf, which only do if the verb ends in a hey, right? So
gotcha.
with that in mind, why do you think the verb to be is feminine here? We have haya, the haaretz haya, and the land was. So why is this feminine?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That is a really interesting question because there is something going on here, right?
Hmm.
You have and the land, which you said it was not grass and herbs, so
Right.
it's about physicality being brought into existence.
Absolutely. That's a
And
really
so,
nice way of putting it. Yeah,
yeah.
physicality. Yeah. Because of
And
course
now
Hashem is
this
the infinite.
next word
Hmm.
shows us that it's pointing to something that is feminine.
Right. So the land, haaretz, that's it turns out the land is a feminine word.
Mm-hmm.
So when the aretz does something, it does it in the feminine.
Right.
So the word to be has been made feminine by the fact that the noun haaretz is feminine.
There,
So
that's
so
good.
she,
That's good.
so it's almost like
Yeah.
saying the land she was rather than it was. It's almost saying the land she was, right?
Right. Right. And so
Um,
the land being, and also any country considers their country almost a feminine thing. It's a nurturer, right? It
right.
takes care of you. It grows crops. That's beautiful. That's good.
We have this kind of Mother Earth idea.
Yes,
And of course, if life comes out of the earth, that's a feminine characteristic.
that is.
Um, yeah, I like that. Okay, so for haaretz, hayta, the land was.
Mhm.
And then we have this phrase tohu vavohu. Tohu vavohu, lovely sounding thing to
Tohu
say.
vavohu.
And this, in the modern age, we use this idea to mean chaos, tohu vavohu. Now, the translations you'll mostly get are unformed, which is the tohu, and void, vohu. And you're like, what, void? Like its taxes don't count. We've voided it. But it's the idea that it's unformed. It doesn't have, just as you said, physicality yet.
It hasn't been organized into the proper DNA and everything to make it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You think about God is the infinite.
Right.
Infinite means without limit. And limits, if you think about everything, every object that you hold, like this is my phone, it has limits, it has edges, it has physicality. But God doesn't have edges. There's nowhere where God isn't. So there's no end to God, the way there is to an object.
So in reality, he's having to create limitation, and that's the process that we see here.
Exactly. We're going from the infinite to the finite.
Yes.
Now, God obviously stays finite, but the finite, God stays infinite, but the finite becomes what we need. God's creating what we need in space, which is the finite universe. Everything we've ever experienced is finite, and God made that for us to inhabit. So tohu vavohu is before that process. It's unformed and void. It's the kind of big wobbly, undefined, semi-infinite, and it goes on to give us more detail and say that. Sorry, I've just noticed here. I've put in this circle here to connect it down here to the word tahom. In a minute, the word tahom is going to mean deep. So you can consider tohu vohu to be unformed, but if the tahom is going to be the deep, that's the unformed deep. So I've just noted that to connect myself. We'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
But it says tohu vohu. It says v'choshek al panei tahom. Okay. So choshek is just a word for darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this tendency, you're going to see the word deep to home in a minute. We have this tendency to think of the deep, we think of the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the deepest thing that we've ever experienced.
Right.
Apart from those couple of astronauts that might be tuning in, we've only ever been on this planet, and the deepest thing on the planet is the ocean. So we immediately picture that. But we're not starting on a planet because the planets haven't been made yet. We're starting up in the unformed. So we have to think more like astronauts and say, oh, the deep, the unformed deep, is like, space.
Correct.
That's what we're talking about. This. And so choshek, darkness, al panei tahom, is on al panei, the face of, your panna, your panim is your face. So panei with a yod and a sera is face of, tahom, the deep, this unformed deep. So it's vast, it's unformed, it's dark. This is the blank canvas that God is writing the universe onto.
Right, and it's interesting I want to restate this so that people can understand what we're witnessing here is God creating restriction and physicality, and He's placing all of this in dark matter. We're in
unknown.
Physicality's in the dark matter. He is light. Everything with him is illumination. There's no darkness in him. So he has to create out from himself this space. And this is what we're talking about. And the wind of God is sweeping over this whole ball of the universe that we see.
Right. And that's it. And I think that if you ask a physicist, if you're talking to a physicist, you say, what happened before the Big Bang?
Exactly.
Most physicists will tell you that the question doesn't make sense because we think, oh, Big Bang, that's when matter and energy started. But actually, it's also when dimension started.
Correct.
Time and space began with the Big Bang.
Right.
So, when we see this first sentence that we dealt with last session, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, you go, oh, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Oh, that's it created. You're like, no. This is the introduction.
Right.
This is the process we're about to see. All of this stuff is how God did it. So what we're looking at here, the land being unformed and void, this is God preparing the space. I'm now going to start working. And like you say, even the idea of light and darkness, these are principles, these are laws of physics that God is going to introduce, which means when he first introduces them, or it first introduces them, we'll talk about that grammar in a minute, it doesn't necessarily look like what we think. even when we come to light, the light is there's a kind of light, and then God adds rules to it. So it's all about introducing rules to the universe that we all then take for granted, but they're not necessarily there in the first instance. So exactly as you said, we have Choshek al Pnei Tahom, darkness on the face of the deep, right? And then just as you said, V'ruach Elohim. And so of course Elohim that's the noun. We discussed that last time, didn't we? That's the noun of God. So that's not the personal name of God. That's just the noun, and you can apply that to God, the only true God, or foreign ideas of gods and deities and things like this.
Also, Elohim here is in reference to is a masculine. It's judge. It's the final ruler. It's the final designer. It's all the above when you see Elohim.
Right. Absolutely. As we go through the Torah, you see that it tends to use one word with certain aspects.
Absolutely.
And another. Yeah, absolutely. Ruach, interesting. And now, grammatically speaking, you can see how we have a resh, we have a vav with an u dot in the middle of it. So we don't say the v in vav unless there's a vowel underneath the vav. So when there's a dot over it, we say o. When it's underneath the hook, we say u. So we have ru. But strange thing about the letter chet, which is coming at the end here, is when you put a patach underneath it, and when it's the last letter of the word you put a patach under, you say the vowel before the chet. So that might be confusing people. Some people might know some of the rules and go, oh, that's rucha, but you'd need a hey on the end. But if it ends in a chet and there's a patach, you go ruach. Okay, so that's that word. And that is, just as you say, wind or spirit. Even the word for smell is reach, right? And smell is considered to be the kind of most spiritual sense, because if I'm talking about sight, I'm looking at something physical. Light is bouncing off a physical object, I'm looking at it. If I'm talking about taste, I'm measuring something with the senses in my mouth. All of these different things. If I'm hearing, I can hear where something came from. But smell is very intangible. And you can't tell where it's coming from, you can't tell how big it is or how recent it is. You don't really get that much. You just get a kind of sense of something, right? And that's associated with spirituality, and so is ruach, wind. So of course everything at the moment is the intangible. Wind doesn't have shape, weight, you can't feel it, you can't measure it, it's just this flowing. So everything right now is flowing, and soon we're going to start having fixed objects and edges. But even when describing God is described as Ruach Elohim, the most intangible, hard to connect. Intangible, by the way, I don't mean less real, I mean less easy to measure. You can't, put a finer point on it. So Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, the wind of God, Mrachefet al Pnei Hamayim. Now, this word will not come up again, so I'm just going to tell you what it means, right? But when it's words which come up very commonly, like al panei, we can discuss why that means on the face of something. But merachefet, well, I'm just going to tell you, because we have this word here, rachaf, which is to do with hovering, and it's not a great deal of stuff in the ancient world and in the Bible that spends a lot of time hovering. We haven't invented drones and helicopters and whatnot. So occasionally a bird might manage it, but they're not the subject of the Torah. So that rachaf is to do with hovering, and so it's it's around above what's happening, okay? But Ruach Elohim Rachefet hovered al Pnei Hamayim. Now, another point of contention. We don't have planets. We don't have stars. We don't have matter, really. So when it says Hamayim, which is the modern word for water, are we thinking the Spirit of God is hovering over the face of the H2O, of the, two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen? H2O, yeah, and an oxygen atom.
Had to figure that one out real quick, yeah.
Right, yeah, I had to check. Am I counting this right? So, Mayim comes to be the word for water, but right now I think it's better just to think of this again as flow, because that's what water does, and everything in Hebrew is defined by a verb. Right?
So this space that was formed, this dark matter, physicality, we see that it's not water that he's talking about. It means that this flow that was going on, this energy that was forming up this physicality and getting ready to bring about creation was sweeping through it, was sweeping over it. Like it's active.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also not It doesn't have an edge or a shape, or it's,
No.
it's like water just takes on whatever shape of the environment it's
Right.
in. That's that
Right.
kind of a thing. So everything that's been described, even the arets, which we think of being very fixed and with boundaries and borders,
hmm
that's unformed and void.
Right.
God is Ruach Elohim, the wind of God, and
Right.
then all of this is happening on top of the Mayim, the something flowing, something liquid, something maybe not physically water, but something flowy. So
Right.
that's what we've got. It's all in flux. It's all in flow. It's all in chaos. It's all
I like to look at it.
undefined.
I like to look at it as energy
Okay, absolutely.
or frequency or something like that.
Could
Something
be.
is actively like working there.
But we have to be talking through metaphor because we
Right.
have never experienced anything like this without the laws
Absolutely.
of physics. So we're using the best language. Torah is using the language which is most clear to us, but
Yes.
we're still trying to imagine something almost unfathomable, right? So where does it go next? Well, then you talked about energy. This is really cool. Okay, so that's the premise. The earth was unformed and void, darkness on the face of the deep, the wind of God hovering over the face of the water, and then this is the first kind of introduction of an act of creation, right? And it happens with the word V'yomer. Now you're going to get to know this word really quickly because this is actually probably the most common word in the whole Bible. Amar is the three-letter verb root to speak or to say. The yard is telling us that he or it is doing it. That in Hebrew, there's not really an explicitly masculine gender to words. There's either explicitly feminine, exclusively feminine, or masculine and neutral. So if something is masculine or neutral, it uses this tense. So the yod means he or it will do it. And this vav here, I'm actually going to change the color of this vav because I tend to use the red vav to mean and. But this is actually a different grammatical function. This is a tense flipper. So yomer would be he will say. V'yomer means he said or it said. Okay. So this flips. It can flip a past tense word in the future or a future tense word into the past. It doesn't flip the present because if you think about them past, present, future, or past, present, future, when they flip, the middle stays in the middle, right? So you can only flip the future into the past, past into the future. So yomer means he said. Who said? The next word is Elohim, right? So God said, whatever's going to happen next, God's saying something. And what does God say? Well, we have this word Yehi. You remember earlier on we talked about Hayatah was from this set of words. Excuse me, scrolling through. Haya, Hoveh, Yiyeh. Haya is was, Hoveh is, and Yiyeh is will be, right? With a hey on the end. And Yehi is the same word as Yeh. It just doesn't have a hey on the end. You can make little changes like that. So Yehi means there will be or it will be. Okay. Do you know the word or? Have you come across that word already? This word Aleph Vav Resh.
I don't think we have, but it's light, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So what God says is there will be light. He doesn't say let there be light. To let something, that's another verb. That would have to have another verb in there. So we always say let there be light as if something's stopping there from being light, and then God takes, opens the floodgates and out comes light. No. God says literally simply there will be light or it will be light, right? And the crazy thing about this is that that's an act of creation because God is truth. God speaks truth. God can't lie, right? And God is speaking the universe into existence. So when God says there will be light, there has to be. Light comes into existence because God said it would happen, right? Because otherwise it would have caused God to lie, and God can't lie. So the nature of the truth of God caused this light into existence. The fact that is that the universe obeyed God and light happened. And let me show you something cool. We know that this blue vav here is a tense flipper rather than and, right? But the bit that God is saying is yehi or, there will be lights. The next bit, vayehi or, is not God speaking. This is the result of God speaking. And that vav is not a red vav, an and. This is a light blue vav. This is a tense flipper, right? So when first time we saw the word yehi, it meant there will be light, right? The second time we see it means, rather than there will be, it means there was light. Right. Now, this is the thing you're going to bake your noodle. Okay, hang on. Why am I making a big deal of this? Well, the reason is because we have Haya means was, Hover means is, and Yiyeh means will be. So why doesn't the Torah use the word Haya? Yehi or there will be light, Haya or there was light. The Torah is trying to show you that exactly as God said it would be, that's how it was. We don't even change the word. We just flip the tense because we need it to be past tense because that's how the grammar works. But we don't change the words because exactly as God said it would be, that is how it is.
That's incredible. That
Isn't that
means
fun?
before this is conceived, that is it, and it was, or it happened, and light came, it
Yeah.
already happened because he just conceived it in his conscious, and it happened. He
He
spoke
spoke it,
Right.
and then it responded. It
Right.
couldn't not. There's two really cool things about this. One is that, okay, that means God is introducing principles, and the principles cause the universe to exist. Like he's introducing rules. You ever notice how people who have got a problem with God often have a problem with rules?
Yes, of
They
course.
say, oh no, you can't tell me what I am, you can't tell me what I can do, I can
Right.
do anything, and the laws of physics and the laws of biology don't apply to me, and they have a problem with
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Intrinsically they're offended by laws,
Absolutely.
rules, and principles, right?
Absolutely.
Because actually they're striving after chaos. There's some sort of suffering
Right.
there where they're reaching out for the chaos, and God's saying, here we go, here's rules, here's calm, here's a system, and you need this to exist, because if God didn't introduce the laws of physics, we'd really be in shtuck, right? We'd be suffering, right? So that's the first principle. The second principle is, and this is kind of a bit of a boggler, if whatever God says happens the way God says it's going to happen, therefore, even light itself doesn't have free will. It just does what God says. It exists because God said it would. How does God introduce free will?
Oh,
That is to say, when God says, like, to pick an example out of a hat, you can't eat this fruit. How does a person then go and eat that fruit? If God says, rest on the Sabbath, how does a person not rest on the Sabbath? How is it that we humans are in a position to defy God?
correct.
Because God's setting up the rules. So if God doesn't like that, God just doesn't give us that ability, right? If God wants us to be automatons, robots with no free will that do everything right all the time and never make any mistakes, he just keeps us like light and just tells us what to do, and we do it.
We could have just stayed there with him.
So absolutely, yeah, we just are perfect, right? But we're capable of being imperfect. And if God's introducing the rules, what's going to happen to get us from here, where everything obeys God's voice, to where we are now? Now, remember as well, even everything in creation, a fox doesn't defy God. A fox doesn't have the concept of defying God. A fox just is a fox, right? A sheep is a sheep. The sun is the sun. Everything is what it is. Even angels can't defy God. They're just the impulse of God. So how is it that people can do it? Well, this story is going to tell us how that is. This as we read through these verses, the Torah is going to tell us, how did we get into the mess that we're in now, where we want to do right, but we're constantly struggling. We can't seem to get ourselves.
This is the beauty of why we are here, is that we signed up for this. We agreed with Hashem that we wanted to go from a holy state to a state of absolute, like, this world physicality is the most bound prison that we could choose, because we said, we think we can maintain our holiness and free choice if you give us this opportunity, and we'll be able to elevate our neshamas to the highest level. And
Wonderful.
we're in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And listen, I started off as a primary school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And a really important principle of teaching primary is that letting the kids know you can make mistakes.
Right.
Because if you are ashamed of mistakes, or you don't want to say because you might be wrong, then you don't say anything out loud ever. And if you don't want to have a go because you might do it badly, you never have a go at anything. And kids aren't really scared of mistakes. They have this innocence where they go, I'll give it a go. I'll see if I can do it. And so then they learn and grow and mature, and it's messy, and sometimes they fall down, and sometimes they get bruised, and then they get back up again. And this is very complicated. But
Yes.
that's kind of what God did for us as well. And we need to stop beating ourselves over the head with the idea that we have to be perfect all the time. We can never get anything wrong.
And we also need to quit thinking that this whole process just turned out to be a accident and things just fell apart.
Right,
this is all
because
purposely working. I mean, it's working as it's designed.
Even the idea that we took on the idea of free will in the first place, a lot of people will tell you, they'll call it the fall, or they'll call it the tragedy, or whatever it is, or the fall of mankind.
Yeah.
But it's life. You think God didn't know this was going to happen? God set this whole thing up in the first place, knowing full well what's going to happen, and took pleasure in it. Right. So, I'm excited to see where we go, where we explore.
No, this is going to be so good because, you know, when we get to Adam and his decision to let Eve eat the fruit, in his mind, he already knew, like, we can work through this, like we can fix this. Now, by the time he ate the fruit, the sages say that he lost the ability to know what to do. But the whole point was he knew what was going on.
Right. Well, this is the thing. There's so many interesting discussions in the commentaries because this book is so interesting that you get the smartest people in every generation going, let's have an argument about this. You know, let's, you know, and some things are inarguable. Everyone's in agreement. This is what happened. And other times there are people are like, you know, pulling the hair out, going, how could you think it was that? It was this? Right. But it's supposed to draw us in. This is not some dead text where you learn a list of rules and I'll follow them, and then no, you're supposed to grab hold of this and interrogate it and say, what do you mean? You know, and a lot of the time, religion and religious people want things to be black and white. And clear. But the Torah all the time takes our great leaders and tells us when they made mistakes. And it even shows us sometimes people who we think are terrible doing good things. And it shows us the gray area, and it shows that life is this struggle with getting ourselves to where we need to be. And that's life, you know. If you want to skip past that, you want to skip past life, you know. This is the game, you know. Yeah,
and to those people that will watch this video, I just want to let you know that we're just barely touching the tip of an iceberg here on the whole philosophical life lesson and living lesson that comes just from what we're talking about right here. Like, there is so much to talk about that we wouldn't have time just describing the state of humanity and why we're here. It's just, I just find this fascinating. Go ahead. I'll end up mucking it up.
With that in mind, you and I, we have to keep an eye on each other and say, let's, like, to remind ourselves to stick this on the page, because there's, just like you said, there's so much, and you and I, we love this stuff, so we like go off on a tangent.
I know it.
Maybe that's what the people watching want to see as well. But
maybe so. We'll see.
It's too exciting to have discipline. Should we pause there and
yes, let's go ahead and wrap this up. We're going to go into the next verse and in the next session. So guys, stick around. I'm hoping you're enjoying it. Make sure that you share this with your friends. If you happen to see one of the video shorts on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, make sure that you share it. If you want to get a hold of Moshe yourself, you can email him at Moshe R. Abrahams, and it's just one word, at gmail.com. You can go to NETIV also if you need to contact us. So God willing, we'll see you next week, and be well and study. Shalom.